Hey YouTubers, today we're going to be painting some cove molding, and that's by special request from one of our viewers, so let's get right into our demonstration here. The painting demonstration, I just wanted to talk to you about scenarios when you come onto a job. You never know what to expect. In this case, the contractor installed the cove molding, and he also did some preparation. He filled the nail holes, and he also caulked the gaps between the ceiling and the wall in the cove mold, which is great. But in this particular example, the contractor also taped off the wall side, and he explained that when he was wiping the caulking off the wall, it was actually marking the paint. And the reason for that is we have a flat finish paint on the walls as well as the ceilings. But the ceiling doesn't matter because we're matching the ceiling with flat white ceiling paint on the cove mold. But we have to protect the wall from the caulking and the paint. So he found that when he was wiping the caulking, it was smudging the paint. It was damaging the finish of the paint. And that's because it's a flat paint that isn't scrubbable. Now there are a few products that are, but in this case it wasn't. So he had no choice but to mask off in the caulking process. And he thought it'd be a good idea to leave it while I painted. And so I'm going to show you why that could be a good idea. I'll show you why it could not be a good idea. And also I'm going to show you, if you decide to paint with the tape in place, I'm going to show you how you can do that with the least amount of problems. And you might ask, well, what problems could there be? Well, I'll explain them as we go through the demonstration and afterwards as well. So let's get into the painting demo. So you can see where the crown mold has been installed. Some people call it cove mold. It's actually a crown mold. You can see the difference in the primed MDF compared to the ceiling, and you can see where the contractor has taped off, as I mentioned. Now fortunately he used the blue tape, which the adhesive is a little less aggressive, but it can still cause problems. So you can see he's done some nice work there, caulking. He's caulked all the joins, and he's filled all the nail holes, and he was able to wipe the caulking back and have a nice clean edge with the tape, and it doesn't affect the paint. So at first appearance it looks good, and we're going to go ahead and paint with that tape in place, but I'll show you how to do it so that it doesn't have problems. And I'll also explain what problems could occur. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. We've got our drop sheets down, we've got our paint ready, and as I mentioned in the introduction, it's the same paint. It's basically the ceiling paint, flat white ceiling paint we're going to be painting the cove with, or the crown mold. So we don't have to protect the ceiling. We don't want to put too much paint on the ceiling, but we can afford to go in 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, because we know the paint is a match. So we just go ahead and apply the paint. There's some fingerprints up there, so we can get those at the same time. Now you'll notice my brush is about half the width of the crown mold. And so once we get going, what we're going to do is paint the top half of the crown mold, paint all the details, and then go back into our wet edge there. Now this is what I want you to be cautious of. Just because the tape is up there, we don't want to rely on it too much. We can still paint as if the tape isn't there, because if it's loose, the paint can sneak in under the edge, and then we're going to have to paint the walls, and that would defeat the whole purpose. So what I want you to do is paint the bottom half of the crown mold like that, and then just cut in the bottom. And just imagine, don't rely on the tape at all. Don't put any paint at all on the tape if you can help it. If you accidentally do go onto the tape, that's fine. But try to paint up into that bottom edge instead of in, and try to force the paint in on the edge of that tape. So just cut in and pretend the tape isn't there, and then just work your way along. And I'll show you. Paint the top half, cut that in. Paint the bottom half. And then cut in. Just imagine the tape isn't there. And as you paint in an upwards motion instead of into the tape. So you can see that I've actually got paint on the tape there, but the way I was angling my brush was up against the bottom edge of the crown. And then you just work your way around, and that's it. But I want to talk to you some more about this tape situation too. So we've gone around with one coat now, and what we can do now is apply a second coat. And we don't have to be so concerned now about this edge, this taped edge, because what we have painted up against there has sealed that edge now. So we can actually afford to come down. But just another thing, or another tip that I wanted to show you, is I'm using a 2.5 inch sash brush. And when you paint with this, use the angle to your advantage so you don't get right too much up on the ceiling or on the wall. So work with the angle of the brush and then the angle of the crown mold, and things will go a little smoother for you. So now we can afford to go down on the tape a little bit because it's sealed now. But then you still want to try to minimize how wet the brush is along the tape and how much you want to paint down on it. So after we put a second coat on, I still want to talk to you about removing this tape and what we may or may not find underneath. Now we're ready to peel the tape back. We've let the paint dry off somewhat. It dries very quickly being flat ceiling paint. But when we peel this tape back, carefully find an edge to start with. And then we want to pull away and back on itself. We don't want to pull it out like this at a 90 degrees, at a 90 degree angle. Pull back on it and away. Now what I wanted to let you know about, so you've got a nice sharp edge here, but as you pull away, you may see that some of the paint has sneaked under the edge. Or you may find that the paint underneath the tape is going to lift off. So it just depends on how well the walls have been prepared beforehand, before they were painted. But if there's any loose drywall, or if it wasn't primed, you might find that the paint will remove. So far, it looks like it's doing fine. Now the adhesive is pretty aggressive on here. Don't forget the contractor was rubbing on the tape. So he pressed the tape into the paint pretty hard. But it seems like the adhesive is releasing fairly well. So we're just going to continue on like this and remove all the tape. So as you can see, we have a nice clean line once the tape has been removed, and the trim is now the same color as the ceiling. Perhaps you see a contrast just because of the lighting and the angle, but it is the same sheen and the same color now as the ceiling. You can see there's no creeping of the paint under where the tape was, and there's no paint has been removed, so we got a break. Elsewhere in this particular project, the paint did come off the wall a little bit with the tape. So what we have to do is hopefully find some paint that matches in the basement, or in this case it was in the utility room, and just sand the hard edge of the paint where it comes off, and then just touch it up. Because it's flat builder's paint, it's very forgiving and it doesn't show up. It's probably the only finish where you could do that without having to spackle to make it all smooth. And then you'd probably have to repaint the whole section of the wall where it peeled. That's why professionals don't like to use tape, because they really don't know what's underneath and it could cause more problems. If you don't feel confident that you can cut in that bottom edge of the crown mold, then that's how you would paint it using the tape. Brief demonstration on how to paint crown mold, or cove mold, that might be otherwise known as. Nevertheless, look out for a video very soon how to paint crown mold without the tape. So until then, feel free to leave comments or ask any questions. I'll do my best to get back to you. It's been Craig, the Muskoka painter, helping you take the pain out of painting.